Can actually do that yet because they're not an established position, and I'm not for making an established position yet. My goal last year when I had that position, when Rose Evelyn was here, she filled that position when I was AVP org, and I didn't want to put someone in yet or have it in our setting goals without kind of reviewing the position and see if they're actually worth putting in, if that makes sense. So maybe in a couple quarters before I leave, thank God, I'm gonna put this person in to setting goals, because I will have reasoning behind putting in a new person on, like the U.S. Grants Director has a reason why he or she is there. So I'll just reevaluate. So that position right now will not be in SOFAB. SOFAB is just the 7 senators and the chair. And yield to AVP.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it would really help having a representative on SOFAB at this point with the caps. But I am willing, I mean, I appoint the SOFAB members, I am willing to like do an interview process for someone who'd like to sit in, not necessarily vote, but perhaps guide me in terms of media for the next caps, because hopefully the next AS Council won't reprioritize the media budget as badly as they did 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, I'm willing to do that, as well as I'm going to start holding, I can't decide if I want to do workshops or something of that nature to talk about fundraising, what we can do in terms of sponsorships, because at this point I'm done talking about CAPS and I want to move on to that and actually work with the student orgs, like not a lot of the AVP student orgs have done in the past. Except my predecessor.
Michael. Great motion.
Okay.
Raise your hand.
Oh, I guess.
Just
Pass.
Sweet. Arohi.
Sorry.
So I've been hearing council talk a lot about fiscal responsibility, knowing where money is coming from, where it's going. I'll yield to whoever can answer this question, but with regards to new student or new media orgs getting funding, that $500 from student programming, would new media orgs be held accountable for that $500 that they get? And I'll yield to whoever can answer that question. No one can answer that question?
Nobody wants to take your yield, so we're moving on. Elizabeth.
So I have a new amendment to make. It is completely new, so please listen. I'm proposing that we amend 2B, instead of saying at least 25%, to say at least 15%. And the reason I'm making this amendment is because the New York Times makes about 16% of their revenue from ads. So I don't think we should be holding our college student media on the side of what they're actually doing right now, even though it's very important in their lives. These students shouldn't be held to a higher standard than the New York Times can even accomplish. So my amendment is to 15%. Did everybody hear that number? 15.
Yeah, it's on the
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right. Are there any objections?
There's no second.
Oh, there is no second.
I second.
All right. Okay. Give your objection.
Okay, so you basically by putting.
New speakers list, by the way.
Okay, so by you're babying the media org, you should let them grow, and they're responsible. They need to self-sustain themselves. They can't be dependent on AS the whole time. Yes, it's 25%, but like what? Depending on our budget, we won't. Maybe our cap for 450 might go lower, depending on our budget crisis next year or the year before that. But they need to learn that they need to self-sustain themselves, and they can't just be babied by AS every single year. And to be honest, I don't know, maybe I should have some babies, whatever. Use a thesaurus. But honestly, no. They need 25% is low enough. And honestly, we're being pretty generous with this 5% phase-in process. Where what's 5% of 100? $5. So if it's $100 thing, they can raise $5. That's not that hard. But no, 5% for spring. If you read the proviso, it's 5% spring. So I'm just saying that they need to self-sustain themselves, because as AS, we can't promise that they'll get more money or less money in the coming years, depending on our fiscal crisis. And I yield to Carly.
I mean, when I did the research for this, as I said, not throwing it together at the last minute, I did research. One of our fellow UCs for continued funding requires 50% of funding fundraising. So 25 is like pretty much nothing. And then with the caps, like I think it's fine. The incentives, like it all pretty much equals out. It's still better than those poor other media orgs at the certain UC. 50%. Dang. What would we be doing now if we had that predicament?
Carpenter.
Yeah, so again, we seem to find ourselves in a predicament but I mean, my concerns are still the same. I feel that we're trying to come up with a new solution, but to me, like the fundamental issue still remains that there's a very limited amount of money, and there seems to be a limited amount of kind of things that we can do, and they're all pretty grim. And yes, I did a little research of my own too. Some UCs and other schools, they don't fund their media orgs at all the way we do it. You have to obtain some percentage of funding first before you can even be considered for matching funds. And yes, we have a tradition of funding orgs 100%. But I think what we should do is try to entertain some more suggestions from the media orgs. So with that, I'd like to yield to someone who would like to speak. The media org. Anybody? Nobody? Oh, Alec over there.
Remember to speak on the amendment.
On the amendment, or at least in response to Andrew's comment about baiting media orgs, why don't you show some consistency and do the same thing with student orgs? Stop
That's
saying
your
that
first warning, no personal attacks.
the VP of Finance.
Speak on the amendment.
On the amendment, why don't you make this for all student organizations a 50% fundraising for? And if you want consistency, Mr. VP of Finance, please show some consistency. As for fundraising and necessarily the amendment or the 15%, I should stop throwing money at the Guardian, and actually you guys could actually use that money that you guys use to advertise in the Guardian, to advertise in the media, you're mandating to get extra funding. Just a statement on the 50%. 50%, still better than 25%, but just as the California Review, I think mandating, pretty much mandating and coercion is wrong, but that's off topic. That's for me. Thank you. I'll yield back to anyone.
I have the right of reply. So, we are going to be reevaluating the programming funds. We're just doing media first. So we're doing, tomorrow, me and Carly will be sitting down and working on programming. And we already talked about that for weeks. We decided to do media first, and then we'll be doing caps, restrictions, and all that fun stuff for programming. So keep that in mind. And
Point of information. How much do we give the Guardian?
oh, zero. There we go. We don't fund the Guardian.
You advertise. You do advertise in the Guardian.
We get a benefit. Yeah.
All right, Elizabeth.
Okay, so I understand wanting to have a sustainable media funding system. I think that's a great goal for the VP Finance to have and the ADP student org. The problem with the number of 25% is that it's not sustainable. It's going to kill the org. And I understand there's a whole proviso. It's only 5% this year. But honestly, you're not going to be able to jump from 5% funding to 25% funding in a year. Like, I don't think it's going to happen, honestly. And I don't think they think it's going to happen either. And yes, I understand there are other UC schools that have a model where they have to fund 50%. But we have to look at our school and how it would impact our media orgs. I think it's good that we do research and we compare other programs. But we have to see if it's really feasible, unless we just want to stop funding media altogether. Also, a last point, I don't understand why we're so concerned with getting outside funding, because all we're doing is holding student money and giving it back to students. So why are we making them raise money to get their money back?
Christian.
Just to go off what Elizabeth said, I really do think we should keep it small and gradually grow as the years go, because we are just starting us off. I'm sure the other UCs start off small, and then they start growing with their percentages of what they need from other sources.